Today's webinar is entitled Digital Graphics, Yours, Mine, and Ours, A Guide to Their Legal Use, presented by Mary Minow. Mary is a library law consultant who specializes in copyright, privacy, and free speech. She teaches digital copyright at San Jose State University's Library School and will be teaching copyright at Dominican University in Chicago this spring. She edits the Stanford Copyright and Fair Use website, and she's always looking for good sources of graphics that aren't burdened by copyright. I'm now happy to introduce Mary Minow.
Thanks, Eileen. You know, library folks are becoming more and more aware that when they find that great graphic that they want to use, that there's copyright issues that they really need to consider. At the same time, there's more and more sources of graphics that you can use. So we're going to talk about both of those sides of the coin. And maybe you're aware of this issue because somebody's using the graphics that you designed or the photographs that you took without your permission. So this webinar is going to look at all sides of the issue, including a look at social media. I mean, who owns the graphics that are placed in sites that the library doesn't really control, like Facebook. So we're going to first look at yours. When can you use other people's images? Because that seems to be a very popular topic. And where can you find images that are not copyright burdened in a way? And then second, we're going to look at mine, the images that you created that you're concerned about someone else using. How can you protect them? Should you protect them? How can you share them if you want? And what about mine in a different sense? What about images that somebody has made of your library? For example, somebody's come in with a camera, maybe just on their cell phone or their smartphone, and they're taking pictures inside your library and then posting them. What kind of control, if any, do you have there? And then third, who owns the images that are posted in social media sites? By you, by your users, and we'll take a look at, or is it Flickr that owns it? So we'll take a look at that. Some of this is going to be refresher review if you've listened to some of my earlier copyright, so that'll be great. Some of it's going to be updates. I have a lot of material, and a lot of it will start with this flow chart, which is how I often look at copyright issues. Is it okay to copy and paste a digital graphic? Let's take that as our question. Well, the first diamond in my flow chart is blue. Blue skies, clear sailing. Is it in the public domain? I color that blue because if it's in the public domain, you can do whatever you want with it. You don't need to give anybody any credit. You don't have to give anybody any payment. You can just run with it. It's so wide open that if you can find somebody who wants to buy it, you can resell something that you grabbed out of the public domain. If what you want to use was not in the public domain, and we'll talk about how to figure that out, then I have a yellow diamond. Is there a specific copyright exception for what you want to do? And generally, in what we're talking about today, it's really practically non-existent. So if what you want to do, it doesn't fall into a specific copyright law exception, then you go to the gray diamond, which is fair use. If it's if what you want to do is considered fair use, you don't really know, that's why it's gray, until you get sued and go to court. But nevertheless, there are some factors to keep in mind to try to figure that out. And if what you want to do doesn't fit into the public domain, the specific exception, and you can't make a good faith fair use case for it, then I have the final stop, which is green, get permission. Now, many times you're going to want to go straight to that, get permission, send an email to a webmaster. If you know how to go about finding the right person, then sometimes that's a very simple thing and it's free, and you may start right off with green. And I color green because that's go, and I also color green because sometimes money exchanges hands. So what's in the public domain? Well, it's so small that it fits into one PowerPoint slide. Anything that is an original expression on a fixed format, and that includes online. Online is considered a fixed format. If it's on a web page, for example, then it is copyrighted today. You don't need to register it. You don't need to even put the copyright notice, copyright, 2011, your name. As soon as you have a original expression in a fixed format, it's copyrighted. So this is what's not copyrighted on this slide, and I have a mnemonic fridge. Facts, You can't copyright a fact. Recipes. That's a very popular question. The Copyright Office has its own circular on that. Believe it or not, you can't copyright a recipe. It's factual. It's a sort of a cross between facts and ideas, which is the third thing you can't copyright. If you want to protect an idea, you're going to have to want it. You're going to have to get a patent or keep it as a trade secret or get a non-disclosure agreement signed, but they're not copyright. They're not protected by copyright. Dedicated works, that's if somebody dedicates something to the public domain, and U.S. government works, and works that have expired into the public domain. So what do I mean by expired? That means that it was published in the U.S. 1922 and earlier. I say sail the ocean blue through 1922. Those images are available, and there actually are some pretty cool images that you can find from that time frame through Library of Congress site, American Memory, etc. But a lot of the time that's not going to be quite enough for you. So I do highly recommend Stephen Fishman's book, NOLO, which most of your libraries will already own, The Public Domain, How to Find and Use Copyright-Free Writings, Music, Art, and More. And there's a 2010 edition, so make sure you have the most up-to-date, because a lot of new sources have become available to help you figure out what's in the public domain, and related works, i.e. works that come with permission. Because the two sad truths are that, one, works on the internet are not automatically in the public domain. Raise your hand if you already knew that. I have a feeling that the people who came today are people who okay, I see that. Yeah, very good. The people who came today are people who know that. That's why you're worried. That's why you're listening today. And second, the presence or the lack of a copyright notice is also without meaning, because if it says copyright, then the date and the name, that doesn't mean that it's got a valid copyright. For example, a famous example is the Declaration of Independence. There are websites that post that and then put a copyright notice with their name and their date. So copyright notices are not always that helpful. And as I mentioned in the introduction, they're not required to enjoy copyright. So where do I go for public domain images? My favorite is still the U.S. government, because it's something that's easy to find. I go to Google Images and I limit my search to site::gov. That's what I do, and I put in whatever I want, like a pickle or whatever I want the picture of. Then it shows me right away all these pictures. I click on the picture to try to ascertain whether it's from the U.S. government, which is in the public domain, if it was created by the U.S. government, or if, sadly, the picture I really loved, it was from a state or local government, in which case it's not in the public domain, and I'd have to make another justification or get permission in order to use it, because only works that are created by U.S. government officials in the line of duty, so not on their own time, but if it's on a U.S. government site, then that's in the public domain. And I love those because you don't have to worry about giving anybody credit. You don't have to worry about anything. Whatever I want to do with that is fine. And there is a search.usa.gov/images. So you have two ways to go about it. You can either go to advanced Google Images, which is what I do because I have that habit, and then I limit it to site::gov. Or you can go to search.usa.gov/images. That is more likely to be a U.S. government site, but it still has, a number of state and local government images somehow got wrapped up in that too. Another source of looking for actual public domain sites are those that are dedicated to the public domain. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Creative Commons.org, which is a way to license images, allowing people to use it sort of pre-given permission. But there is a lesser-known option that Creative Commons users can do. If you are contributing or if you're looking for a public domain image, there is a CC0, and it's a public domain dedication, where you are saying, I am dedicating this work explicitly to the public domain. So it sort of turns things on its head from the way a lot of people think. The automatic default is that your expression, no matter whether it's just a doodle or what, but if it's an original expression, it gets copyright. You have to actually take a affirmative step to place it in the public domain. So where can you find these images? A good place is openclipart.org. That has images that have been dedicated to the public domain using the CC0 public domain dedication. Vicki and Eileen have had a conversation. Please define public domain. And Eileen has pulled a definition from Wikipedia. What I would say is that it's something, the term is used in different contexts, but in the copyright context, it means that it is free to use, that there's no copyright owner. And so famously, Disney used a lot of old fairy tales that were in the public domain and created these fabulous movies. The movies themselves enjoy copyright by Disney, but the underlying fairy tales were drawn from the public domain. So public domain in the copyright context means that it's free for anyone to use. There is no copyright owner. Let's see. Another good source of public domain images is the Wikimedia Commons. Now there, in my subtle background of this slide, I've got half blue background and a half green background because it's a mix. Some of the images at Wikimedia Commons are in the public domain, and some I color with a green background because they are not in the public domain, but they have they have a pre-given permission for you to use. And there's a difference because if it's got the permission for you to use a freely given license, there are still going to be conditions. Generally, it means you have to give credit. So it's a mix of public domain and freely licensed images. You can use both, but if it's a licensed image, you've got to abide by the conditions. And they are explicitly they're explicitly designated as being either in the public domain or as a licensed image. And so let's look at permissions. Permissions are great, especially if they're freely given in advance. Then it's there's no time lost really. The Creative Commons licensed images are a fantastic example, and those are very discoverable. As you will see, I'll show you how you can find those images pretty easily. ClipArt generally gives you permission in advance to use the image, but with conditions, as the Creative Commons has conditions. Or it's possible, you don't see it too often, but it's possible that the copyright owner has written into their copyright statement permission. For example, copyright, and then the date and the name, and then another statement saying you are welcome to use this, and then it usually has some conditions there too. To find Creative Commons licensed images, there's a number of ways, and one way is to go to search.creativecommons.org, and I should mention that there is a handout of the key resources, so you don't have to download all these slides if you don't want to. I have the key resources like this as a list of links. And the search.creativecommons.org, unfortunately, doesn't search across all of these sources, but you then can choose Flickr or Google or Photopedia or Google Images, and then you can also have a more granular search in saying these are the conditions that I'm willing to accept as a user. All of the Creative Commons images require that you give credit to the copyright owner. Some of the Creative Commons licensed images, in addition, will only allow you to use them for non-commercial purposes, which is going to be, in this group, most of you. So that's not really a limitation. And some of them will not allow you to make derivative works, meaning you can't translate it into another language or turn it into a movie or something like that. So you can choose to limit your search based on the conditions, which is kind of interesting. Here's Photopedia. There's a lot of really beautiful Creative Commons images, but some of the images also say all rights reserved. So take a look carefully at the statement by the image before you use it. But it is a great source of Creative Commons images. You can also find Creative Commons images through the advanced Google search. You can say, at the bottom of that screenshot, it says, I want all images regardless of license, or you can limit it to images only that allow me to reuse. And again, you can have a more granular approach to say, I only want it, I don't want it if it's not going to let me do commercial use or modification. Flickr, I often go just straight to Flickr, and again, there's an advanced search where you can say which type of license you want, and you put in your word, paper boats, or what have you. You can also, I think this is nice, limit it to photos, screenshots, illustration art, which is very helpful, and that's a great place to go. I used Flickr to find images for this presentation, including this picture that you'll see later in the presentation of a man taking pictures. So this is a Flickr image, and what I did was I put all the credits at the end, as you shall see. Probably the simplest way to find Creative Commons images is through a plugin. So you can have a drop-down search in Firefox and some other browsers. Obviously, you know that you can have a drop-down search for Yahoo and Amazon, but there's also one for Creative Commons, and that's a really easy way to find Creative Commons licensed images. But then you must abide by the license terms, and as I say, all of them for Creative Commons require that you give an attribution, which is not that simple to do. Some of them also have the requirement that you share alike, which means that if you are creating something new and you want to put a copyright statement on your work, then you have to actually share alike so that it's got the same Creative Commons license on your work. So that's an interesting condition. How do you attribute a Creative Commons licensed work? It's not... there isn't a single way, but you can link to the Creative Commons license and or show the chosen logo, because they've got the different types of restrictions built into the logo. By is the attribution, and C is non-commercial, and SA is share alike. But most important, you must link to the work. As for crediting the author, do your best to credit the author in the manner that he or she has specified. Whatever information they've included in their graphic, include that. I always find it difficult to, in a PowerPoint or whatever I'm doing, to fit it all right in that slide. So I've just started doing this, and I recommend you consider it too, is put credits at the end of the presentation. It's very effective, and it doesn't clutter up your slide so much. So all of the images that I got that were Creative Commons, I put at the end of this presentation. You can use that as a model if you think it's good. What about clip art? Well, if you can find a hard copy of it, that's really the simplest. How many of you use clip art from, say, Dover Publications? Raise your hand. Still a really great source. Okay, good. Eileen's raising her hand, and some of you are also just saying yes. There's no license because you're getting it out of a book. And there I have my picture of the man taking a picture. So taking a photograph of a clip art from, say, a hardback book is a great way to go. You don't have to worry about any extra conditions. Or you can take your own photo of something, of course. Then you own the copyright. But if you're getting, most of us are getting clip art from a digital source. And if it's from a CD-ROM or if it's from online, then you have agreed to whatever conditions are. And, you know, are you really going to read all of that? Basically, they require, some of them will require a link back to their site. Some of them will say you may use this for newsletters, et cetera. But a normal condition is you can't take this whole set of clip art and reproduce it, and you can't sell the individual images. So those are common conditions. But when you use something that's already in a digital format, chances are close to 100% that you have agreed, you know, by clicking on something, you've agreed to their conditions. So I often get the question about, well, what about the Microsoft clip art? So I thought I'd pull that out specifically because that it's something everybody asks about. And their conditions are written, you know, if you look at their terms of service, and to translate it into English, it's basically you may not redistribute. So if the clip art itself is the primary value of what you're doing, you're not supposed to redistribute it. You're supposed to, you may not give your users the rights to redistribute because you don't have them. You can't give those rights. You can't use the clip art for commercial use, and then they give a definition of what they mean by commercial use. Commercial use is a very amorphous term. I think that this particular audience, it's not going to be a problem, but if you're using it for something that might be, then you might want to look at how they define it. And you can't use their clip art to create obscene works. As I mentioned, some copyright statements will give permission. Here's a picture that I took of my cat Lightning, and I have a string attached to show that there may be strings attached when you use other people's works with permission. You have to satisfy whatever their conditions are. So I had a statement where I said copyright Mary Minow 2008 may reproduce for print use only. So I just threw that in there for fun. So I'm saying if you want to use my picture of my cat, that's fine, but only for print use. And I'll be able to check through TinEye and Google Images to see if anybody has taken that picture and used it. Now, there may be fair use or other exceptions that could apply, but if a valid contract is formed, that will trounce any copyright-specific exceptions. That's the thing. Is a license is a type of contract, and that will trump any copyright rights that you already have, including fair use. So how do you ask for permission? Can you just ask for it verbally? Raise your hand if you've asked for permission and gotten it. And if you have an interesting story about that, then toss that into the chat window. That would be useful for people. Okay. A lot of times it's very, very simple. You send an email to the webmaster and you get a response back. The tricky thing is the webmaster may not be the copyright owner. The webmaster may have grabbed it from somewhere else or just put everything together but didn't actually create the graphic. So an email is fine, even verbal is fine, but it's better to get it as an email or in some kind of writing because that would give you proof if there was an issue later on. But when you ask for permission, throw in there that some assurance that the signer has the authority to give that permission, and ask them to point you to the copyright owner if they in fact are not the right person. And in the key resources, I link to examples of permission letters so that you can look at the wording and use it if you like, or use this other fantastic NOAA book, Getting Permission, which has forms with a permission worksheet, a permission letter agreement, etc., a photo permission agreement. So Getting Permission, how to license and clear copyrighted materials online and off. And again, there's a new edition. So if you have a standing order, it's already in your library, and take a look at that. So now I'm switching over from you being the user looking to get yours, to get other people's stuff, to now it's your stuff, and things look a little bit different when it's on the other side. So what about images that are created by library staff? And what about images that are of the library or staff or the library patrons, then what do you do then? You don't have as much control as you might want. Let's say, let's look first at the situation where a staff member creates an image, okay, either drawing or a photograph. Who owns that image? Well, if it's done on the library time by a library employee, somebody who gets a W-2, who gets a paycheck from the library regularly, that would be a work made for hire if it's done by an employee at the direction of the employer. Now, that's something that kind of is intuitive. What's not as intuitive is that an independent contractor who is not a 1099 person, somebody who's not an employee legally, but say a freelance graphic artist or a freelance web designer, or a company that the library has hired to do this work, then in fact the artist or the creator is the owner, unless there's been a valid work made for hire agreement. And those work made for hire agreements are very specific. And in the absence of that, and this is surprising to a lot of people because let's say you are the library and you hire an artist and you pay them a lot of money to do a drawing of your library, the artist is still the copyright owner. You may get the drawing, but that's different from getting the copyright. You need to get that transferred to you in writing, have a valid work made for hire agreement, or just know that you are not the copyright owner of that. If you are surprised by that, raise your hand. Okay, got at least a few people who are surprised. Yeah, that means I'm glad that you're listening, because it's not it's not an intuitive thing, and it's not the same in every country, but that's the way it is in the U.S. The default is that the creator holds on to that copyright. If you're an employee doing it for your employer, then the employer is the copyright holder. But otherwise, it's the freelancers. So can a local government be a copyright owner? And the answer is yes. The federal government images are in the public domain, and that's per federal law, 17 U.S.C. 105. But state and local governments, the default situation is that they are copyright owners of the works that they or their employees more specifically create. They may dedicate the works to the public domain. That rarely happens, especially in these days when everybody's trying to make money. I've seen workshops offered by the state of California on how to make money from state of California copyrights. I have seen, certainly in libraries who want to share their works, that the local governments can offer a Creative Commons license. So that's not quite dedicating it to the public domain, although you may if you're the one in charge. I mean, if you're the administration or the governing authority, or you may offer a Creative Commons license which also shares your material, but it requires that someone give you credit. So now that you're looking at it from that point of view, it's actually a great thing that you might think to require subsequent users to give you and your library credit. So how do you know if somebody's using your images? TinEye.com. This is something that is really, really fascinating. It's a reverse search image engine in which you can upload a graphic or paste a URL, and it will, like within nanoseconds, find it all over the web. And so you can find out if somebody is using, say, my photograph of my cat or the photograph that you took. I just became aware that Google is now doing this. If you go to their Google Images page, you can do the same thing. In fact, you can even drag and drop an image off of a web page into the Google Images search engine. It's magic, and it'll find it all over the web. If anybody has experience yet doing that, let me know. That's a brand new service, but TinEye's been around for a while, and for example, here's a stack of books, and I've fed it to TinEye and 362 results. And that's very useful, not only just to see if somebody's using your stuff, but also to you're trying to figure out, when you're back to being the user using other people's stuff, to try to figure out who might own that. You might find clip art, here's sort of an aside, but you might find clip art shown on the web somewhere. If you didn't click on that agreement to use it, then you're not bound by any license terms. So that's an interesting thing. But there's still a copyright owner. So this is a useful way to try to figure out, well, where does the image begin? You know, did it begin on a U.S. government website? That would be very helpful. Did the U.S. government take it from somewhere else? It's just a very useful tool. And if you haven't used TinEye or tried this new Google Images before, I recommend you try it today just to get to before you forget about it. Okay, now let's say you are the copyright owner, you are your library, and you're not happy that somebody has been using your graphics. You can issue a takedown request, and there is a set procedure for doing so. The set procedure is actually part of a law in which you have registered, or the site has registered a copyright agent, which I'm about to talk about. But it has become a very standard method in which everybody uses, and it's accepted pretty much everywhere, this takedown request. And you can find examples of real takedown requests at chillingeffects.org. So, for example, here's a complaint to Twitter that somebody has registered, and apparently Twitter has fed that to Chilling Effects. So there's a lot of examples of actual cease and desist letters and takedown letters. And what's really nice about this site is you can click through to terms to get the definitions, and the definitions, for example, public domain, you'll get them in the right context of what it means in terms of copyright, as opposed to what it might mean in another setting. So what are your legal rights? Well, the online service provider, and that includes the library, has what's known as a safe harbor if it follows these DMCA takedown procedures. You may sue a party that's posted your image if the image is registered with the U.S. Copyright Office. So most of the time in the library world, you haven't registered an image with the U.S. Copyright Office. You can issue the takedown letter, but you can't get the big bucks of the lawsuit unless you register it. You can register the image after the alleged infringement, after you see somebody using it, but you can't get as much money. To get the real big money that's part of the statute, you need to register before somebody starts using it without your permission. Now, how do you register? It's actually really easy. It's gotten easier over the last several years. You can register something online. So if you put a lot of time and effort into something, you may want to register. It's only $35. You can set up an account. The hardest part is coming up with the password, but once you've got that done, it's remarkably easy. I give this as an assignment to my students every semester, and it's a joy to give the assignment because the responses are like, it's so easy, it's so easy. Especially if it's a new work that you created entirely yourself. It'll get more complicated if you have co-authors or if you're using somebody else's work as part of your work. But even then, it's pretty darn easy because they will give you click-throughs to explain the different complications that you may have in your work. So you do get the protection of format, but to get that big money damages, you do need to register, and you have to timely register before somebody infringes. So you can infringe before, you can register before the infringement begins or within 3 months of publication. Okay, now you're also the copyright owner, but you want to give permission so others may use. Now you go back to Creative Commons and you set a Creative Commons license for your images. You keep the copyright, but you're allowing other people to copy and distribute according to the conditions that you specify. So it's really easy. You go to creativecommons.org/choose, and you create a license. It will give you some HTML code that you put back into your file, into your digital image file, and that will attach the Creative Commons license, thereby making your image discoverable when somebody's using, say, that drop-down Creative Commons search engine from Firefox, or they go to the site itself, or they go to Google Images, etc. That little bit of computer code makes the whole thing searchable in that way. So a different question is, what about the images that someone else takes of my library, my staff? What's the legal status there? And that's a question that Stanley's has sent to me several times from some of you. Let's go through some different scenarios that the library might choose to deal with that question. You've got a patron who, say, actually asks you, isn't that a delightful scenario? They ask you if they can take a photo for, say, their travel blog or what have you of the inside of your library with different library users. Okay, the library might say yes. We'll look through each of the analysis for each of these responses. Yes for private use only, yes but not of patrons without their permission, or no. So are any of these answers legally correct? Let's take a look. The guiding principles, here's all these, a picture of all these folks coming with their big cameras into your library. Oh my goodness, what are you going to do? The guiding principles is that you must follow library policy, whatever it is. If you're the one helping to revise that policy, then keep listening. But whatever your policy is, follow it, despite whatever I say next. And really extremely important is to treat everybody the same, or you open yourself up to a discrimination lawsuit that you're treating different people differently. And you're safer legally if you're letting people take the photos. I would say, as a bottom line issue, check with a lawyer before you come up with a policy that restricts people from taking photos. So let's run through the different possibilities. The library says, yes, go ahead. Well, the library is a public place. Things work out. That's a very good response. It's legally probably the safest response. But if there's abusive behavior, somebody's like in somebody's face annoying them, then you deal with the abusive behavior under your conduct code. Well, you may say, well, what about people taking pictures of our insides and then posting it on some social media site and then, saying really nasty things about us? What if the photographer is critical of the government or the library and puts really derogatory comments? The answer is, that's free speech. That's her First Amendment right. So if you're going to restrict the photos in any way, you're going to want to focus on the taking of the photos, not on how it's being used, because there's a strong free speech issue there. Another possibility is the library says, yes, you can take a photo, but only for private use. Or this is not uncommon in a lot of older policies. It may say, or for non-commercial use. Well, the non-commercial use, that term is no longer that meaningful, I submit today, because what does that mean? You've got blogs that have ads. I mean, what does that really mean? My comment here is that in the past, it meant that it's somebody coming in with a lot of equipment and maybe lighting, and it could be a disturbance, and maybe they should set up an appointment, and that was the reason for having that language, non-commercial use. But today, I think having a conduct policy makes more sense. You may say that, no heavy equipment without arranging in advance, but to say non-commercial use is not a term that works so well anymore. California law does forbid some uses of photos, and in California Civil Code Section 3344, it's very narrow. If any person who knowingly uses another's name, photograph, or likeness for purposes of advertising, selling, soliciting purchases of products, merchandise, goods, or services without permission will be liable. What does commercial purposes mean? The code goes on to say that it's a question of fact whether or not the use of that, say, photograph is directly connected with the commercial sponsorship or paid advertising. So it has to be a very, very direct connection between that person's image and a product without their permission, that would be against the law. A third possibility is if the library says yes, but not without, oh, I just saw a question from Heather, are .mil images the same as federal .gov images? I'm so glad you said that. Yes, yes, yes. And the USA search does include the .mil. And I have not yet ever figured out a way to do Google Images to say limit to .gov plus .mil. So I do .gov, and if I don't find what I want, then I'll do it again as .mil. But .mil is definitely available. So thanks for adding that in. Okay, the third possibility that the library might say to the person who's asking, can I take this photo, with my cell phone in your camera or with my big heavy equipment in your camera? You might say yes, but not without the patron's permission. So if you're taking pictures of the books, that's fine, but you can't take pictures of patrons. Well, that's a pretty broad prohibition, and you would need to justify that. And I would recommend you see an attorney before you come up with a policy like that. It would also be really hard to enforce. There's no audible clicks these days on a lot of on cell phones unless somebody wants it. And so I would be very hesitant to have a policy like that. That's not quite the same as saying you can't take pictures. You can take pictures, but if another patron complains that you're bothering them, that would be a conduct issue. But if the other person doesn't even know about it, then there isn't that conduct issue. So I would be hesitant, and I would recommend you see a lawyer before you put that policy in place. Because photographers generally do not need consent in public places. There's taking the photo and there's using the photo. And the thing is, there's a newsworthiness part of the law. Using somebody's photograph in connection with news, and that's very broadly defined, public affairs, political campaigns, et cetera, shall not constitute, you don't need consent for that. So newsworthiness will prevail. And if you ever turn on, the news, including tabloid news, you'll know that that's a very broad definition. Another possibility is the library just says no photography. I think that would be actually a little bit easier than saying yes but no under certain circumstances, but still I recommend that you see an attorney to help you draft that plan. There could be justifications like no flash because it's bothering users, or you've got delicate material. That's pretty easy to justify, but just flat out no photography ever. You should check with your attorney. You might say but Mary, aren't we responsible for patron privacy? You're always telling us, Mary, about patron privacy. Well, is there an expectation of privacy? There is an expectation of privacy in the public restroom. There's an expectation of privacy in somebody's private parts. If somebody's upskirting, I can't believe it, but I was able to find a picture pretty easily of somebody upskirting, taking a photograph under somebody's skirt. And there's an expectation of privacy in your library records. But other than that, when you're in a public place, there really isn't a legal expectation of privacy. There possibly one could argue at a closed children's program, but your mere presence in a library is not protected. And we certainly have video surveillance cameras that we share with law enforcement when needed. So what about the copyright? Well, the library is not the copyright police. What if somebody's taking a picture of something that is under copyright, like a picture of a page of a book? Well, the library is not the copyright police. It could be fair use. You don't know. It could be legally justified under another specific exception. I don't recommend that you get involved when somebody's taking pictures with their cell phone camera or what have you of copyrighted materials in the library. But what if it's a special exhibit and the library signed a contract that said no photography for this exhibit? Or what if there's a commercial interest of the exhibitors or performers? Well, first of all, don't sign contracts you can't honor, but if you have signed a contract, then you better enforce it. And there was a controversy on when patrons were taking pictures of an exhibit called On the Road, a Jack Kerouac exhibit, and there's a discussion by a copyright attorney, William Patry, which I put a link to on this slide. So I offer a sample library policy here. Filming and photography is allowed if it does not interfere with the delivery of library services. Persons filming or taking photographs on library premises are responsible for gaining all necessary permissions to use the photos. You don't have to add that, but it just makes it really clear. Taking photos or videos of persons in the library who ask not to be photographed is unacceptable under the library's code of conduct. I think that's a good thing to throw in there. They're not exempt from the code of conduct just because they're taking a picture. And that library staff may terminate a photo session if it violates library policy or compromises public safety or security. Here's an example. Maybe you've seen this. This was a picture of a nice family, husband, wife, 2 kids, and they put it on their Facebook page. And it showed up in a very unusual place. What would happen if it was a library photo that showed up in an unusual place? Here it was showed up in Prague on a store window to advertise a product. Well, if there is commercial use, then you would have some recourse. Otherwise, you'd have to show an invasion of privacy, which is going to be impossible if it was taken in a public place. Or there's something called false light, if it's being used in a way that's very puts the library in a very false light, like you know, an article about distributing condoms, just for example, and let's say the library is not doing that, or something like, let's say something really bad, like saying AIDS is a great thing. You don't want to. Then you might have a case if they're misrepresenting you in a badly. But if they're just using it without misrepresenting you, then they have free speech to do that. The last section I want to talk about today is ours. Yours, you know, I want to use your graphic. Mine, I want to protect or share my graphics and my pictures of my library. And then the third is ours. Who owns the photographs, you know, that are posted in social media sites? What if the photograph is posted by a user? What if it's posted by the library to Flickr or Facebook or Twitter? Who owns it? And what if we get a takedown notice for an image that a patron posted to our site? So you've got, you know, 2.0 stuff going on. What do you do? Well, if you maybe you've already knew this or you figured it out throughout this presentation, the copyright owner is the person who created the work. So that's the default. The ownership could be transferred by contract, but in the absence of an explicit contract, the person who created the picture is the owner. So if the library staff takes photos on library time, so they're library employees, so it's work made for hire, then the library is the owner, and let's say they post it in Flickr, Twitter, or Facebook. The creator is still the owner, but you have to check carefully to see if the terms of service, if you've transferred that copyright. And I've checked for you. I read the fine print in Flickr, Twitter, and Facebook, the big 3, and posting it to those places, they're not transferring ownership. You are still the owner. You are giving them explicit permission to display. There was a flap last May. Maybe you were aware that TwitPic, which is a picture service that people use with Twitter, was claiming ownership for photos that were uploaded, but they backed off right away. Now let's say that patrons are posting copyrighted material, pictures, it could be book reviews, something that they did not create, but they're putting it onto the library's blog, say in the comments section. Then I highly recommend that you take advantage of that safe harbor that I mentioned earlier. If you do so, then you are in legal safe harbor. You can get a takedown notice for a patron posted photo. If you designate a copyright agent to receive the complaint, you must also put the copyright agent's contact information on your site, and there is some wording to use too. And I do have a handout to help you through that. And once you've done that, it will limit the copyright liability for user content. Then there's that established takedown procedure and with samples at chillingeffects.org. So here's an example from the Peninsula Library System. On the left is the form that you use. It's a very simple form, and on the right is some of the language that you should use on your site with the contact information. Now, I should mention that let's switch over here to this is a sample of the form. It's called the interim designation of agent to receive notification of claim to infringement. I mean, you just want to fall asleep, but it's really worthwhile to file this. It's $105 one-time thing. But I just added today, or Chuck did, thank you, at the top, a red link, and maybe Chuck or Eileen could put this in the chat window too. It's the Federal Register has a notice of public rulemaking, and what's going on is the Copyright Office is looking to change this procedure and to change the form, and they're asking for public comment between now and November 28th. So if you're sort of a copyright geek or you care a lot about this, then you can look at what they're proposing and put your comments on. But otherwise, you can just wait until the system changes. Essentially, they're going to change from this sort of a PDF form to an online form, make it easier to search and find the copyright agents. And I think we are just now at our summary, which is when you're using other people's images, there's more and more places you can go to find them. Public domain is going to be the simplest, but then there's a wealth of images that have Creative Commons licenses. And if you go to the key resources, I give you a number of links, and I also totally recommend the NOO books. Mine would be the images that you've created. You can share them with a Creative Commons license. You can, if you find it something you really want to protect, you can register it with the Copyright Office. And images of my library, basically you don't have that much control. If somebody wants to come in and take pictures, it's a public place, you can do so. You can set up a policy, but then you have to be consistent and treat everybody alike. If you're restricting, I recommend that you have a lawyer look over your policy. And then our social media, whoever posts it, whoever creates it, that's a much clearer way of saying it. Whoever creates it is the copyright owner. But you do have to look at the terms of service to see if once someone has submitted it, if that transfers ownership. The big three, Flickr, Twitter, Facebook, do not transfer the ownership. They just are requesting permission to post. And I do have credits. I want to show you my credits of the Creative Commons images. You can put them all at the end, which is an easier way of doing it, I think. And now I'm going to look to see what questions you have. Oh, thank you, Eileen. Eileen says, here's another good preliminary analysis and discussion document from the Copyright Office. And Eileen has found something that's really a hot topic right now, which is mass digitization. And that's going on right now with the Google Book Project. It's going on right now with the Hathi Trust, which has the Google Book images plus Google Images plus a number of other images that the libraries have taken themselves. And it's part of, there's a lawsuit going on that you're probably aware of between the publishers, authors, and Google, and they've had a couple versions of a settlement agreement that have not been accepted by the courts. So that would be a good topic for a webinar. There's a lot of interest right now in having Congress figure out the solution to that. So that's what the Copyright Office is looking for input there. And let's look at the Q&A. Works idea, that's more from Eileen, explaining public domain. Okay, here's a question from Janice. If a copyright notice is not required, why do some publisher statements in their books say that you may copy some pages, educational material for your class, but you must include the copyright notice? The copyright notice is not required for someone to enjoy copyright, but let's now switch, now you're the copyright owner. It's to your advantage to have that copyright notice because it puts everybody on notice, and you can say what you're giving permission. Maybe you're giving permission beyond fair use, but it's if you're giving permission beyond what somebody is allowed to do under the law, then you're creating a condition saying that they have to include the copyright notice. Tammy, can I legally scan and use a piece of Dover clip art from a book? Yes, because you didn't click on a license agreement, so you you can't, the clip art is from the public domain, then there's no problem. Janice, can I take pictures of books or items in my library and post these into my library catalog? Well, that's an interesting question, and you're probably thinking about the cover art. And there isn't a really clear answer. I did a blog post on it, giving some analysis of the issues. You can make it fair use.
Hi, everybody. It looks like we lost Mary there. Hopefully she'll call back in. Sorry about that. But while she hopefully calls back in, I will add that the text chat has a lot of links and good content. So we will be posting a link to the text chat in the archive for this webinar. And we will also be providing transcripts from the closed captioning. And that will also be linked on the website. But we are also coming up on the top of the hour, so unless Mary can call back super quick, I would like to thank everybody for coming. We have another, looks like we have most of the answers. I would say if you didn't get an answer to your question, you should feel free to contact Mary. And we will post her email address right away. We'll paste that into the text chat so you can get an answer to any questions. Yes, we will be posting Mary's slides. They are, in fact, already linked on the website for this webinar, and we'll paste that into the text chat right now. And you can always go there to download the slides as well as the handout that includes all the links to the content that Mary referenced during the webinar today. And there's her email in the text chat, and we'll also post a link to today's webinar. And the archive will be available at this very same link, as well as the slides from today and the handout that has the links. So we're coming up on the top of the hour. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And on behalf of Mary and all of us at InfoPeople, hope you all have a great day and see you at our next webinar.